The topic of today's episode is strengths and weaknesses. Knowing yourself and knowing your team's strengths so you can maximize performance. We have the wizard of Clifton Strengths on the show today who can interpret our Clifton Strength domains live. Our team has never seen our collective strengths before. What are we really freaking good at? What do we need to improve on? And how can we use our individual strengths for the collective good of the team? All that and more. This is RT Sidebar. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome. This is RT Sidebar. It's a live Zoom recording that we do every other Thursday usually, where we discuss a relevant respiratory leadership topic every other Thursday. So you're welcome to join by registering at vtherm.com/RT Sidebar. And as part of the sidebar, you can leave comments or note on what you're thinking, ask questions in the chat on Zoom, and we'll answer them directly on the podcast. So welcome. Today we have Jeff Maglin, who happens to be my manager and one of the thought leaders behind this podcast, which is super, super exciting. We thought it was important to bring Jeff on the podcast today because he's part of the greater team. And so we just want to give a big welcome to Jeff. And then I'm so excited to introduce our guest, Diane Owen. Diane is a senior consultant at the Gallup organization. She's been with Clifton Strengths for over 42 years. Through 7 different spins of research on the design of strength finders. She's an expert of Clifton Strengths. And Diane, welcome. Can you explain what Clifton Strengths is to our barflies and those who might be unaware of what Clifton Strengths is and Gallup?
I love this, our barflies. So this is awesome. What is strengths? Well, strengths is an assessment that helps illuminate, right, our superpowers, if you will. We spent years, as you mentioned, 7 spins, but years of research in the design of understanding how people fire on all cylinders. And this common language that we came up with and this assessment is a way for individuals to understand themselves, where they're really strong and where they can lean into and create even more success and fulfillment in their life. So
I was talking about earlier how my commander in the Army, he said, hey, Hayes, I can tell any young officer they either invest a lot of time in Excel or they invest a lot of time in PowerPoint. I can tell you're really good at PowerPoint. I'm basically saying you're not so good at Excel. What I interpreted that as I need to go focus on Excel and fix that weakness of mine. What would you think about that?
Yeah, I think hopefully one is self-awareness. Do you know where your power is, right? That'd be the first thing. I think society points us as we're growing up to think about things that we're not good at, that we need to invest time and quite frankly, all your energy in trying to make that average, if at best. So what he was saying is you got a superpower in that, you should go use it. And find someone else who's good at the other. We all have those points of light, if you will, that are easy for us. It's like flow. They just come naturally. And that's really where you're going to get your lift as you think about your performance, right? And also your engagement in life. So that's where it's fun. That's where it's fun. Doesn't mean your job's perfect, right? Sometimes we have those things that maybe aren't our strength, but if you spend most of your day, right, in things that you love to do, that's a great job. That's a great life.
And that sense of flow, not only are you more engaged, because when I'm working on a really interesting deck, time flies by. It's usually better quality versus I'm watching YouTube videos on how to make like a pivot table. And it's obviously pretty bad. Do you mind explaining what the domains are? What are some of the strengths? Like how were they created?
Yeah, they were created based on a study of 2 million individuals and understanding what makes people successful, right, in their world. So think about this in the medical world. It's like an MRI of a whole person. We wanted to understand the makeup. And as we went through these reiterations, we were defining what we call clusters of life themes, right? So behaviors that people had, and we clustered them into what we call themes. Themes are really what we name them, right? So competition, for example, right? It measures a group of tenets that really help us understand that a person needs to have rank and and be able to have a nemesis, if you will, to create that energy about being number one. So that predictive behavior, we began to understand what that was, and that clustered them into themes. And then from there, just to know, people think in clusters. We think in chunks naturally. So part of doing a regression analysis allowed us then to put them into 4 buckets, right? And these dimensions or buckets are really meant to give us some ideas of strengths we can use in that realm, right, that are most impactful. But it does not suggest that that's the only strengths you can use in that particular domain, right? For example, let's say your relationship building domain is a little soft. And what I mean by soft is you don't have a lot of your dominant strengths in that particular domain. You may use things in your strategic thinking domain like learner or input. You're just curious about people. You ask questions, right? You can still build relationships, but it's coming from a different domain. So think about it as having a chain link fence between those domains. And that there's fluidity with how you apply your strengths. It's not a privacy fence. So, yeah, as I always think about strengths, that's the way we cluster them to give you some ability, right, as a human to kind of put them into play around executing or influencing, relationship building, or strategic thinking. It also helps us to identify where an individual can contribute to a team, right, where they're most dominant around their strengths, and including the team. As we put the team together, we can look at where the team is more homogeneous, right, and where we have complementary strengths that we can leverage appropriately as we're aiming them at our projects or objectives, goals, that type of thing. Does that make some sense?
It does, and from an efficiency standpoint, it makes more sense to put a team together that has complementary strengths and weaknesses than it is to find someone who's strong in one aspect and weak in another, and then focus all this energy on trying to improve where they're weak instead of focusing on where they're strong, and
Yep.
then just finding someone who is a good counterpart to that and can balance it out. I think from an efficiency standpoint and from a leadership and management standpoint, that sounds a lot better, because most of the time you're trying to get people's weaknesses up instead of playing to their strengths. So it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to me, and I really like that concept.
Yeah, people are not well-rounded. Let's just be honest. We're like stars with points. Teams
Yeah.
are better to be well-rounded. Now, I will say this: they're probably on most teams tickets to play, right? And it doesn't mean everybody has to come with one strength. They may have to have something in that area, right, of executing or drive or something that is kind of making them fit within the culture of that team. And then we look for those complementary pieces that you're talking about. Because if everybody came with all the same stuff, and I will say teams cluster, they do. So you're going to have some teams that have a lot of executing, for example, but what makes up that executing may be different, right? Some may have more discipline, some may have more of the problem solver. There's a lot of different components to each of those dimensions, which gives us that diversity, right, of how we approach our day.
I
Mhm.
always considered a hospital to be its own little universe, and so I go to all these different hospitals, and sometimes you see it works, sometimes you see it doesn't. I feel like when it does work, that it might be through luck or through time, and the fact that you have turnover until all of a sudden all the pieces line up and fits, and it works great, and no one wants to leave. But that's not really the efficient way. I mean, the hiring practice, do you think that that would probably be the ideal time to find the missing piece instead of waiting for turnover to happen and then the
Yep.
stars align and everyone fits?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you always need to be thinking about your draft picks, right? Future, whether it's around growth, whether it's around replacing, there's natural attrition that comes. Sometimes the roles, the department or the area changes, right? What we're being expected to do. So you're going to bring in different folks for that. My long time ago, my mom, when I was young, my mom said, "Honey, if you're going to look for a husband, you better write it down so you know it when you see it." I don't think that's any different than when you're looking to hire somebody for your team. What do you need them to be able to bring? Right? Again, are there tickets that they have to play just to make sure that they're even in the game at all? And then what else do you need them to have that really completes or complements, right, what we need to do in our team? So you got to write it down. So it starts early in the process for you to start thinking about what do we need to add rather than just fill a spot. Absolutely.
So
What would
Diane,
you say would be,
Go.
sorry, one more question,
go ahead,
Matt.
go ahead, JB. Go ahead,
So,
JB.
you know, the old hiring practice was you hire for behavior or fit, and then you can teach to competence. I mean, this is more advanced than that. What would be the gap between that old practice and to what you're saying here?
Yeah, I think you hire for talent, right? And you develop into a strength. So talent is the raw material, right? You hire it and you build it, you nurture it, you cultivate that, and then you build a strength. We probably should have called this talent finder. That's not the way Don thought about it. Ultimately, it's a building process, right? But that's really what it's about. And it is around, you got to start with the right raw stuff, right? It's hard enough. Think about this, hard enough to pull out what's in there. But what if you have to stuff something in it, right? it's not, makes no sense to try to do it. What you tend to get is somebody who's angry because we're trying to make them different. We just told them they weren't right, the way they were done. And the other piece is that it's frustrating because you talked about, and I talked about flow and how the ease of, right, and the ability to be excellent at it. Doesn't really work that way if you're trying to put something in that doesn't exist. Makes it really difficult. So I think you're spot on with that.
Diane, so Anna put something in the chat and says, okay, if you have a team that has like 5 or 10 specific strengths, is that a red flag?
Not necessarily.
Okay, tell us why.
Not necessarily. It's what it depends on what the team is there to do, right? What the aim of those strengths is. So you have to really think about that. For example, R&D, right? You put people in R&D, they will tend to cluster around strategic thinking, right? That could be creative, that can be logical and pragmatic data person, that could be futuristic and innovative, can be a lot of different things, but they tend to cluster around that maybe more domain than that actual strength. The other side of that is as we grow, that we need some different complementary pieces. We may need to look for partners, right, outside of our core team, right? So maybe others in the organization, or we can look to add folks, right, to that. So that, yeah, as you grow, you got to think about it. But we tend to cluster around what we're paid to do. And what that tends to be, for example, in sales, a lot of times in business development sales, you're going to see a lot more influencing, right? Because they're really giddy up, they get out there, they get after it, they leverage their relationships. It's a whole different kind of an effort of putting strengths down to make that happen. So it's an interesting thing when you look at it. My first question always is, when I look at a team, what are they here to do? What do you get? What are you supposed to get done?
So Diane, is it a red flag when everybody's different? So diversity, we all understand, is fantastic because everybody has a different, but diversity of thought is going to create a little conflict, I'm thinking.
It can. Yeah.
So, but as long as we're all on the same, we all have the same goal, we all have the same objective. It's okay, right?
That can work. Absolutely. Okay. Just appreciating, though, that different people have different views, right? There's a different lens on what they see and what they feel is important. So that's one of the things that we always need to do. The other piece is, if we're going to have differing points of view or thoughts or lenses on this, right, then we need to be able to find a way to productively disagree. Right? Otherwise, you're creating a harsh kind of, intolerant thing that just causes friction, and friction without some kind of ability to control that to an outcome is chaos. So I mean, that's what you're going to, it would not be fun to be part of that.
And so it's a process. So you have to develop a process, recognizing the differences and creating a process of conflict.
Yeah, and appreciation of them, right? I have to understand where you're coming from first, and appreciating it, particularly if it's not something I lead with. Right.
Yeah. Going off of what Matt said and the overlapping strengths. So
Mm-hmm.
say that you do have a lot of overlapping strengths
Mm-hmm.
and, for the most part, and I get exactly what you're saying, that if all of their strengths leads to the goal, then that's fine. But what if it led to like 90%? As a leader, how would I figure out who's that missing piece? What is their strength? And that'll get us, up to 100% or whatever. How would I find that strength? What is that strength that person will need to round out the group and get us across the finish line?
Right. Well, like for example, and it would probably be more of an accumulation or an aggregate, Jonathan, than it would be just one strength. For example, I have teams that are light, again, not a lot of dominance in influencing. So the question always is, well, they don't really like to bring any kind of controversy to the table. And how do they do that? And how do they drive? And what happens when they face resistance in their push? They get a lot of pushback, right? If they're not equipped. Well, there's other strengths you can use, right, to help with that. You can go to a different domain and say, how do we build our relationships with folks that can help us, and leverage partners outside who are a little more push, a little more loud, right? And you've got some in your own organization that you can probably come to mind as you're thinking about who those are. But I'm certainly not going. I'm not going. I know. I'm staring at a couple myself as we look at this. So I'm a believer in you leverage partnerships when you know, but you got to understand what it is you're looking for. And so that's it. So if you say, listen, we're really great thinkers, but we talk and think a lot, but we don't get a lot done. We don't get a lot of action finished, no results. Then you're going to look for partners who can help you do that, right? Or you're going to bring somebody in that brings some structure. The challenge, and I guess kind of the fine line and tipping point of this, is if everybody's so dramatically different, we have a hard time kind of corralling all that towards an outcome. So typically teams, and it's kind of like partnerships or marriage, right? We have a couple things at least in common that we share, and then there's a lot of complementary pieces that go with that. Yeah.
I want to share my screen now to show our strengths, and I think this might help everyone to kind of understand.
Yeah.
Diane, do you mind orienting us to what we're looking at here? And then to the listeners, I'm going to link this somehow in the show notes, what we're looking at, but it's
okay.
It's a report here of our top 10 strengths.
It is. It's
team.
a top 10. You can see the legend up there. We didn't put all 34 on here because one of the things that's challenging is when you have a lot of numbers on here, it can be blinding, even for people who look at numbers every day. What's important about this, looking at a team overall, is that you want to look where there you have an intensity about their strengths. In other words, there's a lot of it going on, right? That looks at that intensity, and I'll show you that in just a second. The other pieces we're looking at, again, by domain. So we've got the color coding up on the left, right? The 1 through 5, which we call your signature themes, 6 through 10. They are actively part of your strengths, right? Those are dominant as well. So don't shy away from those. Someone always says to me, oh, Diane, they're only number 6. And I go, they're still top. They're still your top. They're still your superpowers, right? So cultivating and developing those are important. If you see the 11 through 29, they're not listed on here for each of you, but those are what we call supporting themes. So think about your report. There's 34 we measure. The top third are your dominant. The middle third are your supporting. So you can bring those up occasionally if you need them, but you're not going to use them every day, right? Those just aren't as natural for you. When you get to that bottom third, my question will always be this: do you care? Well, why would you care? Well, you care if it's going to get in your way or the way of someone else being successful, right? So that you'd look at those and say but you're not going to develop them. We're going to look for other ways, right, to go to achieve the outcome that we're looking for. So that's just kind of an overview. Okay.
Diane, that's interesting that you said that, because our fearless leader, Joe Armies, just told me once when I did Clifton Strengths with him, he said, if you're a great quarterback, why do you want to throw a baseball? Well, why do you care? Like, why do you care? Like, live to your strengths. That's why Clifton Strengths it's about strengths. It's not about working on something that's not natural. No, it's about it's about enhancing the things that are natural. So
absolutely.
this makes complete sense.
Yeah, and you think about it, things that in your life, right? As you're looking at this, you kind of read through your report, right? It'll talk about those nuances, because even if we all share our number one strength over here in dominance, now look at executing. Executing is, how do we get stuff done? Simply put, right? How does this team get stuff done? Influencing is, how do you move things forward? Action, orientation, how do you influence others to move things forward? Okay. Relationship building is just that. It's cultivating relationships within your team, outside of your team. How do you build and leverage those? And strategic thinking is just, how does your mind work? How do you process information? Right. So if you think about those as kind of broad scopes, within that, now we've got those strengths. Again, we're talking behavior. So the overall team, you can see that line that goes across the top there for this team. That is intensity. That means that's how intense that everyone is. Matt, it doesn't mean you don't think. Okay, just so you know, Matt saying he has no strategic thinking. People say that to me, I must not think. Well, of course you do, right? There's just probably a different way you come at it. You've got a lot of partners here who think a lot. So that's it. That's important. Anyway, the overall team is your intensity. And what I mean by that is, if we were to make an aggregate of one person out of all of you, we'll squish that together. And we're going to say your number one here in the intensity is achiever, right? We also have an overall intensity of responsibility. Now, even though it doesn't land in your top 10 down below, the intensity of that theme for this team is dominant. You see what I'm saying? So that measures intensity, right? Then when you're looking at the rest of these down below, so I've got each of your names, right? And they're listed numerically in the order. So there's intensity by the team at top, and then there's just numerical down here for each of you below with those strengths. Again, green is top 5, 6 through 10. When they're on this sheet, they're dominant, right? So when I look across here, I'm first going to look and say, what do you think about how we get things done, right? How does this team get things done? The first thing I'm going to point at is, if achiever is here, and achiever, and I'm going to use kind of a generalizable kind of description, means we get results. We get stuff done, right? We focus on outcomes. We make sure that we kind of have a goal in mind, and we're better when we do. We like challenges. Some of you like the pace of it, right? The intensity and the challenge of the pace. And that makes you feel like you're achieving something. It also would suggest to me this group gets bored. And when you do, we got to give you something more to do, right? So it's not necessarily in achieving an outcome. It's kind of like, it's the journey, right? And the next challenge, and you're hungry for it. We're hungry for it. And we get a little edgy. I would suspect this group was a little bit hard to sit in school, just looking at it, and even hard in training and some of that. I mean, you guys, because you get it done, you go, okay, what's next? Right?
I feel like my palm is being read right now.
Same here. I was just thinking that.
Oh my God, it's incredible.
Excuse me. What I love about it is making sure this team knows what they're being challenged to do. And the more we keep bringing that, to the forefront, even better, right? So then we're going to look, because the 3 is responsibility, right? And when you think about what responsibility is, it's ownership for the work, right? So what's mine? And I own it, right? And I take ownership. Now, one of the interesting parts about having achiever and responsibility is a lot of these function in dynamics, right? And those two together are called, for me, work ethic. This group works hard. We own it. If it means staying a little later to get stuff done, so be it. And that's a powerful, powerful thing. Matt's taken all the credit for it, by the way. I watched him there. He's just, that's me. That's me right here. But that's ownership. Now here's there's always a little edge to our strengths too, right? And this is where you got to always be careful, because I don't think that necessarily your bottom 5 or whatever, or your bottom 3rd. But I think when you look at what a weakness is a strength that you're overusing, or using in a way that comes out in a less than positive fashion. Okay. So for example, responsibility achiever, what people tend to do is, when you guys are asked to do something, you say yes, you lead with yes. And I got to bet there is some point in your life when you wished you would have said no. Right.
Chef's
So
laughing.
sometimes we bite off a little too much, right?
That's my life.
That's your
My
life.
whole life.
Not on here, is it?
Oh, got to give him more to do, Jonathan. Just give him more. No, I think that the challenge with those two, I love them, right? I love the ownership and I love the power of getting stuff done. However, part of the coaching that I would help you think about is make sure you step back before you say yes. Can you deliver on it? Are you the right person? What other priorities do you have? And make sure. So in my world, I use the terminology stay tuned when people ask me to do something. That allows me to pull back because I have the very same challenge for me. I just want to say yes.
I use that
So
terminology too. I would
yeah.
say it's also super, well, more so to the podcast, but as you're describing this, it's like liberating to me when someone gives me the ball and says, go ahead and run instead of being super collaborative. Like that's really hard because I just want to go ahead and run, but I'm trying to be like, what do you think? When I really am
Yes.
just like, please just let me go. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's very liberating for someone to say, hey, you own this and you go
Yeah.
ahead. There's
Yeah.
a great question in the chat
Okay.
here from Gary. He says, you may
Sure.
have addressed this, but what is your take on using 360 reviews by engaging same level leaders? He gives an example, nurse director, RT director, non-supervisory executive in this process.
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of 360, I think that you should have a full review of people that measure you.
How
Anyone who
often?
partners with you. But 360s, you typically want to give yourself time. So in our world, we do them once a year, right? For clients that we work with once a year. If you've got something that's been a little more challenging, you might do a quick pulse survey in between on certain items that maybe you're really kind of attaining, a testing and pointing and aiming at, that you're doing some things around just to see how well you're doing towards that end. But a lot of times you're kind of putting some things into place and I think you got to use your strengths, because there's just something. Let's say, for example, somebody on a 360 said, you're just no fun. You don't recognize people's performance. You're a taskmaster. You're just driving results, and you don't take time to laugh. You don't take time to recognize people. That can happen in highly driven people, right? So I wouldn't say, let's start being fun. What you would think about is, who do you have around you that might be a good fun partner? What else do you have here that can help you at least take the time to say who deserves and needs that kind of feedback, that they know I value them? So it's going to come out of different strengths, or it's going to come out of a partnership, right? At the end of the day, 360s, when you've got a whole total different constituencies like that, it isn't about I have to suddenly produce it. It's that it has to show up right on my team, for my team. Hopefully, Gary, that helps. Yep. I'm a believer in 360s, but just not, you got to have people that have objective and are willing to tell you the truth.
If my organization doesn't do 360s, or me as like more of a junior leader, what would you recommend? Can I create my own 360? Can I, and how would I go about doing that?
You might just do something where you do start, stop, continue, right? And you could think about the people that you encounter most often. From what parts of the business do you do that? You could simply do a monkey survey, which you can easily put together yourself if you want to do it that way. Or quite honestly, I'd encourage you just to call them and just say, how am I doing? Right? How are we doing as partners? What do you like about our partnership? What might we want to continue to do? Is there anything I do that just drives you crazy? Right? Or is there something we should just together think about tweaking or doing differently as we move forward? I would encourage you to make a list of people that you partner with often and reach out to them. Have a few questions ready so that it really helps give you feedback. The big thing for me is, if you're going to ask, you better listen. That's the only caveat I have for that. Because if you ask and you listen and you kind of go, okay, and then you don't do anything different, you might as well not have done it. Just never mind. It almost makes you look worse. If that makes sense. Yeah.
It's funny. I think of that Eminem song when he's like, tell me something I don't know already about me, in a way that's like, I know my weaknesses. Or maybe that it's just me, but like I'm my biggest critic. Like I don't know if I need to hear this from someone else. Like I already feel self-aware. Jeff's on the line here. If you want to unmute too, Jeff, we're getting a little too chatty here. We gotta let the man, the myth, the legend speak.
Oh no, I just put a comment in the chat, said never ask a question that you don't know, you don't want to know the answer to.
Exactly. But people will ask you all the time your opinion, right? Even in your personal life, your spouse or someone in your life, how does this dress look? You know, most of us go, Lord, do they really want to know? Because, you know, and what are you going to say that's neutral? It's not going to get you into mischief, right? So first thing when people ask my opinion about anything, the first thing I start, and I've learned this is a life lesson, is do they really want to know? And then the second one is, can they handle the truth? You know, the old Jack Nicklaus and Tom Cruise thing. You can't handle the truth. Well, some people can't. They really don't want to know. They really don't want to know. So what do you think?
So Diane, we have the greatest opportunity ever, because Anna's boss is Jeff Maglin. Woohoo!
I know.
I'm so excited. So Jeff, you know Anna, you love Anna. What does like when you evaluate this, what does it make you think? What, you know, live on RT Sidebar, please give your points of view on your employee. I think that's awesome. Please do so. The floor is yours, Jeff Maglin.
Yeah,
Not
no,
an HR nightmare at all.
obviously Anna's a superstar, and she has a lot of energy, a lot of drive. She brings a lot of ideas to the table. And where I think I help in our relationship is that, just like she said before, she likes to go. She doesn't want, to collaborate too much. She wants to just go and do or execute on her idea. And what I try to do is I at least try to provide some boundaries on, hey, this is what I really want you to focus on. This is the area. I'm not going to dictate exactly how you're going to do it, but here are our objectives or goals as a department. And these are the areas where I need you to be working in. So it's really just to provide boundaries for Anna. And I don't want to micromanage her or spend, too much time in that collaboration phase. But I do need to provide, initial direction and boundaries of, okay, this is where I want you to work within over the next 3 months or over the next 6 months. So, and once we agree that, hey, these are the areas that you're going to work in, then I let Anna run, and she does a fantastic job. So when she said that, I smiled, because it's absolutely true. She's got an idea and she wants to go with it. And I just need to talk with her to determine, is that an idea that we really want you to be working on at this time? So
Anna, can I put you on the spot now? Can you evaluate your boss a little bit about your strengths and weaknesses of how the two of you work together? Because that's, Diane, isn't this the power that you get to understand people? Isn't that what the point of this is?
It absolutely is. And to appreciate each other, even though sometimes we can drive each other a little crazy. Let's just be honest, right? It doesn't mean it's, oh, that's so awesome. Sometimes we can, look at Jeff just a minute here. You're staring at him. He is her grounding. He's her Velcro, right? He gives you the guardrails, probably deadlines to that, ultimate goals. And then he says, go girl, go. And she doesn't even let anything grow under her feet. She just goes. She's confident. She's going to be able to put that together. And I got to tell you, what she gets passionate about is where you're going to hear her lean into you a little bit, because she's got that strong belief. And Matt, so do you. So belief with you, it isn't about you not having values if your belief isn't in your top 10. That's not what it is. When it is there's a right way to do things. I understand she was in the military previously, so a strong held belief about freedom possibly, and the rights of humans and all those kind of things. So she's going to be passionate about certain topics and way things get done. And she's I would say she's a little headstrong in a good way, but she's very independent. Very independent. So the minute you try to corral that's not a good idea. Not a good idea. That'd be like reining a stallion. Let it go. And I think Jeff's got that figured out. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think too, I'm at that strategy element that we see, we're all pretty heavy on that side. But I
Yes.
do see, like, if I'm going on a hike and I'm looking at the landscape, I'm like, oh my gosh, beautiful whole landscape. But I'm not like looking at a flower, like, what a nice flower, if that makes sense. Very big picture, not as much details oriented. And Jeff
Yep.
really balances that part out almost to a fault. Like I would, and Jeff knows this too, where I'll be like, he'll specify if we're doing like an exercise, he'll specify everyone's role and responsibility, the timeline. And it could be like brainstorming, like, I'm joking, but like where to go get lunch. Like, I'm just kidding. But it is so detail oriented. And I just feel almost bad because I know the pieces will fall into place. And I feel like he could have sometimes delegated more, but he wants to take that on because he wants me to enjoy the fun things that I love to do. So he takes on these other things that I should take on. And he takes on totally all these very detailed process oriented things that I do not enjoy, or excuse me, my preference is not. I've learned that my preference is not to do those tasks and whatnot. So
not what you're drawn to, but it is what he's drawn to. You see, I mean, I think that's where he feels like he's shining.
Is
right?
that, Jeff, something you're drawn to, or I feel like it's that responsibility, like you feel like you have to do that?
A lot of times I try to, allow my team to focus on the things that they enjoy and that they're good at, to a fault, because I don't want to dump, tedious type of assignments on them, especially all the time. So I want to show that I'm willing to take part of that load. And sometimes maybe I take more of the load than I need to, because I want to keep them as clean as possible so they can perform to their at the top of their expectations. So yeah, to Anna's point, there's other times I could really delegate some of the sort of menial, tedious type of tasks, but I try to keep my team as clean as possible with that. I want them to enjoy their work, and I want them to, be engaged. And I know so there's a balance there. I think I could be better in sharing the load there.
Yeah.
One other thing that I would like to respond to, because you said this earlier, is that you said, I believe this team probably had a lot of issues sitting still in school. And actually, I didn't. I really enjoyed school. And I think if you take a look at the strategic thinking part of it, you see that I'm a learner and also analytical. So there's always a tension internally with me, because you can see that 6 of my top 10 strengths are in executing. But at the same time, I really want to understand before I make a decision on something. So there's always this conflict, like I want to get it done, but at the same time, I want to make sure that it's the right decision. So that comes from the learner and analytical. So there's always a level of stress to that, because ultimately, I have that execution piece that's really driving to this end goal.
Yeah, but you got that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. That
that's so
deliberative does that.
interesting. When I want to do something new, I try and give the whole picture, so much information, and then I need him to chew on it for a couple of days. Usually, I think you prefer that, and then to come back to me with your feedback and thoughts on it, because I think that's that tension of, here's the tactical, what I think we should do, and then here's the strategy behind it. I think that makes sense based off of your strengths of preference. At least I think so.
For sure. I mean, I always like to digest things for a little while, but only for a little while. And then it's time, we got to go. It's not forever, but I do like to, figure things out before and feel confident that, we're going down the right path.
Yeah. What I like between you and Anna is she's got that activator, right? So that's giddy up, and you've got deliberative and that analytical piece. So it's all almost like yin and yang. So I can be cautious, take a breath, right? That's why I said he's your Velcro. He can cause you to pause, take a breath, make sure that you're putting your energies in the right place, right? And opposite of that, you can kind of go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And that's that is a healthy tension, if you can appreciate it about each other. Yeah.
Yeah. I would also say that Anna helps in that way, because I would be more cautious. And sometimes, she's so animated and passionate about what you're doing, I'm just like, okay, just go. I mean, I know I'd like to consider this a little longer, but just go. It's not that there's not enough risk for me to follow this too long.
Yeah, I mean, overall, too, you guys got competition as an overall dominant kind of piece, even though it's not necessarily in all your top 10. But like you said, is it going to help us win? If that's going to, you kind of then go, okay, I trust her, right? Which you've gotten to that point, you trust, and that allows some of that delegation to happen a little more freely. This is also a group, I will tell you, Matt, I'm looking at that includer. You can see you're the lone individual with that piece and the harmony. So you're our person who brings us together and who often says things like, who else needs to be involved, right? Who needs to be included? What we tend to do, the lower our includer goes in our list, the less inclined we are to offer up and make sure everybody's in there that should be. So we get a little more selective, right? We may even just keep going back to the same well because we trust them, right? That's it. That's our group. That's our crew, if you will. And so once you get to that point of trust, it may be a little more difficult to get in. It's a little difficult to get in. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I just got feedback from my boss recently and said, Matt, you don't have to include everybody on the planet to get something done. I mean, she and that's kind of, it's my strength to a fault. And she literally said, it's your strength to a fault that I want to include everybody because I care about everybody else's feelings and thoughts about it.
Yep.
It's so interesting. I do want to make another case because Butler and I, we always say we're brothers from another mother. Dude, I don't even know you after this. Like, who are
we're fraternal brothers from another mother.
I'm like, who is this guy? So Jonathan, like you see this, like that's the first thing I look at. What does Jonathan have? I'm like, I don't have anything to add. So, but you're really heavy in strategic thinking that I'm not.
Well, like I consider you the social butterfly, and it is funny because I've worked with you this long. I've heard you many times say, who else needs to be in this meeting, right? Many times, right? So this all makes sense to me, looking at your strengths, because I mean, this is how I imagined you to be. And it's funny to see that it played out really well.
Yeah, I think it's more that you're good complementary partners. You're like, if we put you both together, you'd be like superhuman. You know what I mean? You'd have it all. You just see what I mean? It's just like you bring those different pieces together. It's like a puzzle.
Maybe
and I
we're
believe
like
that.
Ninjas.
Yeah, well, think about, you remember that Jerry Maguire movie when he said to her, you complete me? I not that you two are that way, but I'm just saying you complete each other. You know what I mean? And that probably feels right.
Jonathan, I need a hug.
Matt had me at hello. So.
Yeah,
Diane,
I knew. Yeah, you remember that. Go ahead, Anna. I'm sorry.
Have teams ever looked at this matrix and said, oh, our top performers happen to have these qualities or these top 5 strengths, and then perhaps it resulted in a mirror bias where they would only hire people with those strengths? And has that ever occurred to you in your experience?
Well, I think we have, as humans, bias, right? I think we have some natural, what I'll call glare factors of things that we like to work with and things we don't. I think what this helps us to do is appreciate the differences, right? So like we're talking about, somebody who comes, for example, my input and learner are lower in my deck. I happen to work with some people on accounts that have high input learner. And when I first worked with them many years ago now, it was so annoying. They just asked a lot of questions and I thought they didn't trust what I was doing. And what it really was somebody that wanted to make sure that I was prepared. You know what I mean? But it was dragging me down, Anna. It was dragging me down. So she caught me on a day when I was tired. I'd been on the road. I came back and she started pummeling with questions. I said, time out. Do you not trust me? I've been doing this a while. And she goes, that's not my intention at all. My intention is to set up everything so you don't have to worry about the details. But had I not appreciated the differences, you see what I mean? I think that's what it helps us to do, because then you can kind of go, because people get misinterpreted all the time. all the time. And when was the last time you just said, help me understand why you do that? How does that help you in your job? Instead, we are critical of what they're doing. And I've been guilty of that myself years ago. I mean, I still sometimes I kid her because she still asks a lot of questions and I'm still annoyed by some of it. So I'll say to something, hey, you know, you get 3 good questions. That's all I got patience for today. So we understand each other to a point where we can kind of have a little humor about it. Right. But I so appreciate when I'm going to do something for her, it is planned out, laid out, and I don't have to do a lot of worrying about that stuff. So we've learned to partner together and appreciate the differences. And it makes it a whole lot more fun to work with people and productive. Right. But when you get disconnected or you think someone's doing something to you, that's when these things, you got to sit down and have the conversation and go, let's get on the same page and understand where each of us is coming from. But most adults won't ask the question.
And
You
it
know,
helps that you had like a
Yeah.
common language to do
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I would
I
say.
could see.
One thing that I find very valuable about this, and when you work in a group, and especially if you spend some time with people, you have an impression of those people, and you think you know those people well. And I think this exercise helps to illustrate different strengths that an individual might have that you don't realize, or helps to explain why they behave in certain ways. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people that don't go through an exercise like this, they sort of label people certain ways, and it's an incorrect label.
Correct.
I think people overestimate their ability to understand other people.
I think quite frankly, even their own self-awareness, right, of how they show up. So this gives you an opportunity to just say, can I own it? Right. So we give you a name, but we're asking you then to claim it. As you read through these, we want you to say, yeah, that's me. Right. And then you aim it and you think, how can I be more productive in putting it in the right direction and helping others appreciate what it is? So it's helping kind of go through that process too, Jeff, of understanding, but also helping others understand the power of it. Right. Otherwise, what we see is through our own lens, which may not be as pretty. And it may, to your point, may not be accurate. And I've had teams where people have worked together 15 years and misinterpreted each other the whole time. And it was mind-boggling to me. But once they had strengths to really be able to have that conversation, it was like one guy said, listen, I close my eyes when you're talking because I want to make sure I'm not distracted by anything that's going on around me outside the window or anything. And a guy said, I thought you were sleeping. I mean, and they weren't kidding. They were not kidding. And I went, how long were you going to go before you asked? Even jokingly, right? Am I boring you? I mean, something. They didn't just misread each other the whole time. It was mind-boggling to me, but it happens a lot. And then people don't go back to that well. Do you know what I mean? They don't leverage it because they don't understand it. They
I
don't
think
understand it.
this
Yeah.
worked so well today to show our strengths after we took this test and then to have someone interpret them. Like, I don't, like, if you weren't here today to interpret, I think that's like so important in this. Like, if I was a new RT director, this is like the first thing I would do in assuming leadership. I'd be like, everyone's going to do this. We're going to talk about it. This way you can get to know me. I can get to know you. Let's say I'm an RT director and my hospital doesn't have Clifton Strengths. What would you recommend?
Well, I think that you talk to your HR partners and see if there's a plan, right? Because a lot of individuals have been exposed to strengths. The other option is you can just go to the Gallup website, gallup.com, and there is a hyperlink in there. It's called the Strength Center. And you can actually go on there and buy, you can just get you take the assessment, right? You get codes and you can get your 5, you can get top 10, you can get all 34, right? We measured 34 life themes. And though you can do that and be able to pull that together. And it also then what comes with that is just videos, descriptions, that encompasses what you're doing there. So you can begin to learn about yourself even deeper. The other thing is YouTube has a lot of, once you take it, you can take it through the book, right? There's a Gallup 2.0. if that's a way, and you can get your top 5 through that. Or even, talk to your leader. Yep, there he goes. Matt's got that one. You could take it through that and you'll get your top 5. I love having more than 5. I just got to be honest with y'all, because I think there's 6 or 10 is the rest of the story for a lot of us, right? And if you have all 34, I'm even more excited. However, it gives me a good place to start, because maybe if you have top 10, you really fixate on those, you lift them, right? Then you see the power. Then if you get all 34, maybe you don't fixate as much on what you're not, right? Because you can't be all things to all people, right? And I do have people that come and say, I need empathy, man. I'm a cold fish. And I go, you cannot order that from Amazon. So I'm pretty sure, and Santa's not bringing it. So now what are you going to do, really? And what do you want it for? I mean, really? And the guy said, I just want people to know I care. There's a lot of ways you can show people how you care, right? Without having empathy. And the other one is woo, right? It stands for win others over. It's under influence, charm and disarm. I got my Matt here wooing with me. I've got woo as well. But people that don't have it make fun of it. It's win others over. They go, woo, woo, like that. But I go, it's just because you don't have it. And Matt and I can work a room like no one you've ever seen. So we go out, we make friends, man. May not be deep friends, but we're going to go out. You said he was the social butterfly, Jonathan. That's true. It's true. And we're darn proud of it, aren't we, Matt? I'm proud of it. I don't have any problem walking up to anybody and saying hello. I've done it with
a problem at all.
No, I've done it with people all my life. My mom said when I was 5, I was talking to clerks in stores. She'd always look down to see where I was. That's before kids were, couldn't be away from their parents. But I'd be wandering at Sears back in the day. And she said, I just looked for the clerk that was looking down because I knew you were there. And that's what woo and communication looks like. That's why I got in trouble in school. Right. Yeah, I'm a talker. So between that and leading others astray. It was bad. It was bad.
I always try to figure out how to apply this in work, I guess, in this case. So if I'm an RT leader and I have one or multiple departments or sub departments in there, and some departments can be 50 to 150 people, and just the general staff, but then you have smaller sub departments with smaller numbers of people. I mean, this is very difficult, I guess, at scale. So would I look for like certain strengths and weaknesses by job description, or would I try to get it with the dynamic within a same job description? I mean, how would I go about this?
Look at it as teams. So if you've got a shift team or and your direct reports, right? So group them by people that work together all the time. Would be my first comment. Direct reports, and those folks, it cascades down. So it's their immediate leader, supervisor, or whatever that may be, around that, so that they don't get too many. The other thing that you can do as a leader of a larger span of control is just look and see where you're dominant overall. So then that gives you an opportunity to understand, how do I approach this massive group, right? How do I communicate things to them, right? And become more in tune with what you're working with. And so there's a way to really think about that and talk about where we're most dominant. And there's some exciting things about that you could just, at least you're touching, you're saying, I know you, right? I may not know you individually at the frontline level, but you can sure have a conversation with somebody when you get to, if you're walking around or you have a chance to encounter them and say, talk to me about your strengths. Where are you at your best? And people love talking about themselves. And when they have something to articulate it, right, it's so much easier to talk about who they are. Because otherwise, when you ask them, tell me about you, they'll talk about what they're working on, well, not who they are. And so this gives them some of that self-awareness, right, of understanding who I am and how I show up. So does that help, Jonathan?
Makes sense.
All right.
That does. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Diane, we could talk about this all afternoon. I just feel like I, again, had a palm reading today. But we're coming up onto the hour here. I just want to thank you so much for your time on today's show. And then give a plug for our next couple of episodes coming up here. We have Awake and Walking ICU with Kaylee Dayton again. However, we actually have an RT on the pod as well. Her name's Emily Johnson from St. Joe's in Colorado. So we're so excited because they actually implemented change, and we can't wait to hear that story. So that's July 13th. You can register with the link in the show notes or at vtherm.com/RT sidebar to catch that one. And then Diane, I am so excited because Matt and I are heading to TSRC. That's Texas Society of Respiratory Care, which is your neck of the woods a little bit.
Okay.
And we're going there next week. We're going to talk to Lisa and Vanessa, two great friends who work together, and the power of workplace friendships and how that can really influence retention. And I think Lisa and Vanessa yourself.
I do.
And to all the RTs, here's a quick plug. Actually, maybe you could explain this. So Tara mentioned that in a previous episode, Tara Chadwick mentioned that in a survey, your yearly survey to your staff, including this one question of, do you have a work best friend?
Do you have a best friend? Yeah. Do you have a best friend at work?
What's the significance of that question? Why?
Yeah, I just had this conversation with a client this morning. But the reason that best friend, you do have a best friend at work, is in our engagement survey, is that relationships at work, particularly where we have a strong connection with folks, right? And it doesn't mean it's your only best friend. It means, though, if you think about the characteristics of a best friend, they're a confidant, right? You trust them. They've got your back. Maybe that's a person you can vent to and it won't go anywhere else, or they'll help you, right? When you need help or you're stuck in a problem. And when you think about what that does for you, it is a huge key to retention. It's a huge indicator of safety, right? Because we're caring about people we're connected to. We're more likely to be more productive and support them in those moments. They're just less likely to leave, because they're committed to the persons that they're with. So a lot of people, when they interpret that, they think, oh, it's my only friend. That's not it. That's not it. It's really about, do you have a connection with someone there that, honestly, when you're not there, they notice, right? They reach out. How can I help? What's going on? And you'll tell them stuff that you might not tell other people at work. And I think if we all thought about that, hopefully we all have somebody. Matt says he's got a couple here. I'm not sure who the couple are and who just got left out, but I'm just teasing, of course. He's an includer. Everybody here is on his list. I'm just telling you, he's a good guy. So hopefully that helps. As you get into that best friend, it also ties heavily to performance. We just know high performing teams come like that, very cohesive.
What I want to dive into on that episode coming up next week is, so what do you do if you don't have a workplace best friend? And then what do you do if you're the manager and perhaps there's cliques or different dynamics? There's a lot that I do want to dive in there at our next show. And perhaps we'll have you back on here.
Well, just let me know if I can help. I'm glad to do it. You've hit some hot buttons for me for sure. So
great.
Glad to do it.
To the rest of the Sidebar squad, we like to end the episode with shout outs to help celebrate those in the profession and also our loved ones. So I want to kick it off with a huge shout out to my dad. Actually, it's his 59th birthday today. So HBD to Eddie Hayes. Matt, any shout outs?
Sorry about that. I would love to give a big shout out to Cincinnati Children's. Cincinnati Children's has been a great partner of us, partner of our company. They just became #1 children's hospital in the country. So congratulations to all our friends from Cincinnati.
And they're going to be on the podcast August 3rd. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about RSV. Sorry, last plug there. So RSV and how to prepare for it with Cincinnati Children's. We're stoked to have them on. Jeff, any shout outs?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to my brother, Mike. He has a medical device startup that was just profiled on the front page of the Baltimore Sun today.
Oh, exciting.
Oh. Diane, shout out.
Oh, let me just shout out to this crew. You've given me a chance to do something that plays to my strength, and that's talking about what we do here. And that makes a difference in people's lives. And that's why I've been doing it this long. So thank you for the opportunity, every one of you.
Well, the woo in action. Butler, any shout outs?
Well, before my shout outs is more of a comment, or I guess a shout out to TSRC next week. But I'd also like to comment that, Matt and Anna are going to go there. So Matt might have woo, but I have FOMO, and I'm not real happy about it. So have fun down there, and then, teach them a lot. And then shout out to our own Dr. Whittle. Happy birthday. And Brandy Keaton. Happy birthday.
Awesome.
That's all the time we have for today. You can leave a shout out with the link in the show notes. So we love to celebrate people on the podcast. That's anniversary, promotion, birthday, whatever it is. And we will see you next time. Vapotherm does not practice medicine or provide medical services or advice. Any clinical recommendations provided herein are solely those of the speaker. Practitioners should refer to the full indications for use and operating instructions of any products referenced before use. The team behind the Sidebar are employees of Vapotherm, and our guest is not compensated.
Really?